Hello. Sorry for the delay slash absence from streaming for a while. So I've been busy with a few things. Timecrest Academy's book, the last two art for the first book is currently under commissions. So I'll be launching it by Pride Month, hopefully. Yeah, it depends on the artist right now. I finally got the funds for it. I worked hard. I worked a lot, and also. I am gonna be bringing a reading series, so this is from my childhood. This is Inkheart by Cornelia Funke. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's German. I don't really speak German, if you can tell. Right, so I have the book, physical copy. It's not exactly this one. This one's the hardcover. I have the paperback here. The only hardcover I have is Ink Death, which is the third one. So I have all three books of the Inkheart trilogy, as well as The Thief Lord. That is by far my favorite book. So I'll be sharing this as I go along, because I'm editing another book right now, which is very unholy and not very say-so for the sanity of streams. So that one's coming out by Halloween, actually. For those of you who know who Good Grief is, you will know exactly what that one is about. But anyways, today I'm gonna be reading Inkheart trilogy. So the first book, don't know how many chapters yet, but this is kind of like a read and review. Please don't take this like an audiobook. Please think of it more as a podcast, alright? Chapter 1, A Stranger in the Night. So a little thing about Cornelia is that she loves to put in little quotes from things, people that she finds fanciful. So this one is by L.M. Boston from The Children of Green Knoll. The moon shone in the rocking horse's eye and in the mouse's eye too, when Tolly fetched it out from under his pillow to see. The clock went tick-tock, and in the stillness he thought he heard little bare feet running across the floor, then laughter and whispering, and a sound like the pages of a big book being turned over. Basically, Inkheart is a book about characters coming to life, and the main character being a person not from a book, having the ability to transport themselves into the fictional world and also bringing fictional characters out of a fictional world. This is something that really intrigued me, and I think Cornelia herself got the same inspiration for it. I mean, it's truly a writer's fantasy, right? Alright, let's start. Chapter 1. Rain fell that night, a fine whispering rain. Many years later, Maggie had only to close her eyes and she could still hear it, like little tiny fingers tapping on the window pane. A dog barked somewhere in the darkness, and however often she tossed and turned, Maggie couldn't get to sleep. So if you take a study at this, it is an opening that is not very traditionally web novel, and it is starting with the senses of your hearing instead of your sight. So the rain fell that night, a fine whispering rain, right? There's no like sound effects, but it is a descriptive kind of in between a visual and an audio kind of telling. And then there is some use of passiveness because they wanted to guide the reader into imagining from the details forward into what kind of setting that would be. So this is a writing technique that Cornelia uses that you can employ as well for new writers. Let's continue. The book she had been reading was under her pillow, pressing its cover against her ear as if to lure her back into its printed pages. That's very good. I'm sure it must be comfortable, sleeping with a hard, rectangular thing like that under your head, her father had teased the first time he found the book under her pillow. Go on, admit it, the book whispered its story to you at night. Sometimes, yes, Maggie had said, but it only works for children, which made Mo tweak her nose. Mo. Maggie had never called her father anything else. Alright, realize there's a lot of use of passive over here. I'm not sure if Inkheart was originally written in German and then translated into English, but if you are writing, I would suggest to keep it simple. Instead of had said, Maggie said. It would be simpler that way. That night, when so much began and so many things had changed forever, Maggie had one of her favorite books under her pillow, and since the rain wouldn't let her sleep, she sat up, rubbed the drowsiness from her eyes, and took it out. Its pages rustled promisingly when she opened it. Maggie thought this first whisper sounded a little different from one book to another, depending on whether or not she had already knew the story it was going to tell her. but she needed light. She had a box of matches hidden in the drawer of a bedside table. Mo had forbidden her to light candles at night. He didn't like fire. Fire devours books, he always said. But she was only 12 years old. She could surely be trusted. She was 12 years old. She could surely be trusted to keep an eye on a couple of candle flames. Maggie loved to read by candlelight. She had 5 candlesticks on the windowsill, and she was just holding the lighted match to one of the black wicks when she heard footsteps outside. She blew out the match in alarm. Oh, how well she remembered it, even many years later, and knelt to look out of the window, which was wet with rain. Then she saw him. Hold on, I'm gonna turn on the lights. It's getting a little dark. It's gonna rain, but it's not exactly gonna rain. I don't know what's the weather lately. It's crazy in Singapore. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. Thank you for the wait. I also realized that my eyes are not the most trustworthy things, especially when they've been strained so much lately with computer. I'm reading an actual book right now. Print size and font size not exactly the biggest, so I'm having troubles following the lines. It's okay, I got the ruler now, I should be fine. Let's continue. The rain cast a kind of pallor on the darkness, and the stranger was little more than a shadow. Only his face gleamed white as he looked up at Maggie. His hair clung to his wet forehead. The rain was falling on him, but he ignored it. He stood there motionless, arms crossed over his chest, as if that might at least warm him a little. Now you can see the passive use of language over here. And he kept on staring at the house. I must go and wake Mo, thought Maggie. But she stayed put, her heart thudding, and went on gazing out into the night, as if the stranger's stillness had infected her. Suddenly, he turned his head, and Maggie felt as if he were looking straight into her eyes. She shot off the bed so fast the open book fell to the floor, and she ran barefoot out into the dark corridor. This was the end of May, but it was chilly in the old house. So over here you can see that there's some form of inference that the author actually employed into world building. It's not an info dump, it's feeding you information a little by a little about the environment that Maggie and Mo lived in. Alright, continuing on. There was still a little light on in Mo's room. He often stayed up, reading late into the night. Maggie had inherited her love of books from her father, when she took refuge from a bad dream with him. Nothing could lull her to sleep better than Mo's calm breathing beside her and the sound of pages turning. Nothing chased nightmares away faster than the rustle of printed paper. But the figure outside the house was no dream. The book Mo was reading that night was bound in pale blue linen. Later, Maggie remembered that too. What unimportant little details stick in the memory. Mo, there's someone out in the yard. Her father raised his head and looked at her with the usual absent expression he wore when she interrupted his reading. It always took him a few moments to find his way out of that other world, the labyrinth of printed letters. So you can see there's a little bit of character building and introduction slipped into this. This is something that new writers can take note of. Someone out in the yard, are you sure? Yes, he's staring at our house. Alright, see that in this writing over here, they're both quotation marks of people speaking, but you know exactly who is speaking what. You don't have to always write at the end of every sentence who said what. Mo put his book down. So what were you reading before you went to sleep? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Maggie frowned. Please, Mo, come and look. He didn't believe her, but he went anyway. Maggie tugged him along the corridor so impatiently that he stubbed his toe on a pile of books, which was hardly surprising. Stacks of books were piled high all over the house, not just arranged in neat rows on bookshelves, the way other people kept them. Oh no. The books in Mo and Maggie's house were stacked under tables, on chairs, in corners of rooms. There were books in the kitchen and books in the lavatory. Books on the TV set and in the wardrobe. Small piles of books, tall piles of books, books thin, books thick, books old and new. They welcomed Maggie down to breakfast with invitingly open pages. They kept boredom at bay when the weather was bad, and sometimes you fell over them. Alright, so this is a very good way of writing and giving emphasis to how obsessed they were. So you can just imagine a little cluttered space, not very well renovated, but it's cozy, and everywhere you go there is books. This is definitely a writer and a reader's heaven. Let's continue. He's just standing there, whispered Maggie, leading Mo into her room. Has he got a hairy face? If so, he could be a werewolf. Oh, stop it! Maggie looked at him sternly, although his jokes made her feel less scared. Already, she hardly believed any more in the figure standing in the rain, until she knelt down again by the window. There, do you see him? She whispered. Mo looked out through the raindrops running down the pane, and said nothing. Didn't you promise burglars would never break into our house because there is nothing here to steal? Whispered Maggie. So yeah, again, an emphasis and a confirmation that they were really run down because they spent all their fortune on books. He's not a burglar, replied Mo, but as he stepped back from the window, his face was so grave that Maggie's heart thudded faster than ever. Go back to bed, Maggie, he said. This visitor has come to see me. He left the room before Maggie could ask what kind of visitor, for goodness sake, turned up in the middle of the night. She followed him anxiously. As she crept down the corridor, she heard her father taking the chain off the front door, and when she reached the hall, she saw him standing in the open doorway. The night came in, dark and damp, and the rushing of the rain sounded loud and threatening. Dustfinger, called Mo in the darkness. Is that you? Dustfinger? What kind of name was that? Maggie couldn't remember ever hearing it before, yet it sounded familiar, like a distant memory that wouldn't take shape properly. At first, all seemed still outside except for the rain falling, murmuring as if the night has found its voice. But then, footsteps approached the house, and a man emerged from the darkness of the yard. His long coat was so wet with rain that it clung to his legs. For a split second, as the stranger stepped into the light spilling out of the house, Maggie thought she saw a small furry head over his shoulder, snuffling as it looked out of his rucksack, and then quickly disappearing back into it. Alright, over here I would like to point out Cornelia Funke actually didn't use soaked to the bone, right? That is a very common phrase, it's very cliche, but she made it herself when she said his long coat so wet with rain that it clung to his feet. Can you see, like, this is what we call writer style. So if you're having difficulty understanding what writer styles are like, just know that it has to be something that's original to you in how you view the world instead of how you were taught to view the world, if that makes any sense. Let's continue. Dustfinger wiped his wet face with his sleeve and offered Mo his hand. How are you, Silvertongue? He asked. It's been a long time. Hesitantly, Mo took the outstretched hand. A very long time, he said, looking past his visitor as if he expected to see another figure emerge from the night. Come in, you'll catch your death. Maggie says you've been standing out there for some time. Maggie? Ah, yes, of course. Dustfinger let Mo lead him into the house. He scrutinized Maggie so thoroughly that she felt quite embarrassed and didn't know where to look. In the end, she just stared back. She's grown. You remember her? Of course. Maggie noticed that Mo double-locked the door. How old is she now? Dustfinger smiled at her. It was a strange smile. Maggie couldn't decide whether it was mocking, supercilious, or just awkward. She didn't smile back. 12, said Mo. 12, my word! Dustfinger pushed his dripping hair back from his forehead. It almost reached to his shoulders. Maggie wondered what color it was when it was dry. The stubble around his narrow-lipped mouth was gingerly, like the fur of the stray cat Maggie sometimes fed with a saucer of milk outside the door. Ginger hair sprouted on his cheeks too, sparse as a boy's first beard but not long enough to hide the 3 long pale scars. They made Dustfinger's face look as if it had been smashed and stuck back together again. 12, he repeated. Of course, she was... let's see, she was 3 then, wasn't she? Alright, in this case, let's do a case study. In here, they reminded us that Dustfinger was indeed still wet from the rain through his actions. And then, over here, we also could see how Maggie's personality was curious, because it is written in a way that asks the question from Maggie's perspective, even though it's in the same paragraph. And then there was a description on what Dustfinger looks like, so the author doesn't actually info dump everything, but it's packaged in a way from Maggie's POV about the color of the hair, and then it also gives a little more insight towards what Maggie did when she was younger. So there's a little bit of flashback with the memory of a stray cat, comparing it to a stray cat anyways. So yes, and then they have the opinion from Maggie's POV on what Dustfinger looks like. So these are little things that you can ease into when you're writing in your world building. Don't rush, take your time. It will slowly come together and become a very enriched world. Let's continue. Mo nodded. Come in, I'll find you some dry clothes. Impatiently, as if he was suddenly in a hurry to hide the man from Maggie, he led the visitor across the hall. And Maggie, he said over his shoulder, you go back to sleep. Then without another word, he closed his workshop door. So over here we learned that there is a workshop in this little house full of books, and we have no idea what Mo does for a living yet. So it only feeds our curiosity, like what is Mo, what is Silver Tongue? So many questions, no answers. Read on. That's how you hook and entice your readers into state. Maggie stood there rubbing her cold feet together. Go back to sleep. Sometimes when they'd stay up late yet again, Mo would toss her down on her bed like a bag of walnuts. Sometimes he chased her around the house after supper until she escaped into her room, breathless with laughter. And sometimes he was so tired he lay down on the sofa and she made him a cup of coffee before she went to bed, but he had never ever sent her off to her room so brusquely, which means that over here you can see how great the father and daughter relationship actually is, even though she did not call him father and always call him by his name, but they have a very close relationship, and this is the first time that he's ever been so curt with her that she feels hurt. A foreboding, clammy, and fearful. And fearful? Okay, I think that's a mistake over here. A foreboding, clammy, and fearful feeling came into her heart, as if along with the visitor whose name was so strange yet somehow familiar, some menace had slipped into her life. And she wished so hard it frightened her that she had never fetched Mo, and Dustfinger had stayed outside until the rain washed him away. So if we were to do an analysis on this part over here, it is the character growth and development, whereby she always had a very safe place and a parental figure that she's very close with, but suddenly this being shut out of the life and the secrets have driven a wedge between the father and daughter's very close relationship, and she couldn't understand why. So over here she feels betrayed, she feels hurt, she just wants to know but she was not allowed to know, and then her father just didn't like her as much anymore. And yeah, so you can imagine she's 12, and kids that age, they, although yeah, I would assume that Maggie had a very sheltered life if she hadn't actually come across this kind of situation before, and this is the first time. Mo is probably a good parent, but we don't know. Plus, there's no mention about the mom, so there's even more questions right now if you read. Let's continue. When the door of the workshop opened again, she jumped. Still there, I see, said Mo. Go to bed, Maggie. Please. He had that little frown over his nose that appeared only when something was really worrying him, and he seemed to look straight through her as if his thoughts was somewhere else entirely. The foreboding in Maggie's heart grew. Spreading black wings. Over here, it's more of a solidification of how this is. So you can see from the reactions that the father is worried, and the daughter can tell that he is worried, but his reactions and defensiveness towards her only makes her feel like something bad is gonna happen. So instead of hurt, she's now more worried. That's why it's like spreading black wings. So it's a feeling of being tainted in a sense. It's literature basically. It's what makes English beautiful. Send him away, Mo. Send him away, Mo, she said gently, propelled her towards the room. Please, send him away. I don't like him. Mo leaned in her open doorway. He'll be gone when you get up in the morning. Word of honor. Word of honor? No crossed fingers? Maggie looked at him, straight in the eye. She could always tell when Mo was lying, however hard he tried to hide it from her, which also again solidifies how close their father-daughter relationship is. In this case, through the actions and their interactions of how she knows that he's lying when he doesn't do what he says. No crossed fingers, he said, holding both hands out to show her. So this is the level of trust. Okay, it's a trust between two people, father and daughter. So if he says word of honor and cross fingers, so cross fingers is something that implies you're hiding something behind your back. So he shows both his hands out and says, I'm gonna give you my word, it's for real, so please go to sleep, I can't tell you anything else. And will she accept this? Let's find out. Then he closed the door, even though he knew she didn't like that. Maggie put her ear to it, listening. She couldn't hear the clink of china, so the man with the sandy beard was getting a nice cup of tea to warm him up. I hope he catches pneumonia, thought Maggie, though he needn't necessarily die of it. Maggie heard the kettle whistling in the kitchen, and Mo carrying a tray of clattering crockery back to the workshop. When that door closed, she forced herself to wait a few more seconds just to be on the safe side. Then she crept back out into the passage. So over here you can see how sneaky she is, because she made her father promise that he would send the stranger away, but then she didn't keep a promise to go to bed because she never promised anything. He only told her to go to bed, but Maggie didn't promise her word of honor. She had she had no responsibility or no duty to keep up the end of the promise, so this is what she was doing anyways. But I think her father would have known anyways. There was a notice hanging on the door of Mo's workshop, a small metal plate. Maggie knew the words on it by heart. When she was 5, she had often practiced reading the old-fashioned spindly letterings. Okay, and this is what it says on the sign. Some books should be tasted, some devoured, but only a few should be chewed and digested thoroughly. So for those of you who don't know the meaning of what this is, right, it is saying that some books are fast read, they're kind of like fast food read, so it's like web novels, okay? So it should be tasted, tasted as in like you give yourself a variety of things and try everything out, okay? Try different genres, even those that you've not read before. These are tasted and then devoured. So some devoured you just read really quickly, and because you're like, you just want the content, it doesn't matter, so that's more like web novels kind of thing. And then they say, but only a few should be chewed and digested thoroughly. In this case, I'll think Inkheart, especially The Thief Lord, it should be devoured, chewed, and digested thoroughly. So some books you really have to read again and again, over and over, to understand what it means. I usually just read once and I remember a lot of things, so I don't. But there are several cases of me reading several books like a few times just to remember and get what they mean. And every time you read, you realize you come to a different understanding of how things were. That's character development in real life. Congratulations if that happens. Alright, let's continue. Back then, when she still had to climb on a box to read the plague, she had thought that chewing and digesting were meant literally, and wondered, horrified, why Mo had clung on his workshop door the words of someone who vandalized books. Now she knew that what the plague really meant, but tonight she wasn't interested in written words. Spoken words were what she wanted to hear, the words being exchanged in soft, almost inaudible whispers by the two men on the other side of the door. So yep, they didn't really explain the meaning of this, so the author actually leaves it for free interpretation. But anyways, Maggie was in a position of when she was younger. You know, children with cognitive developments that are not so there yet. Yeah, they tend to take things very literally. So that's what happened to Maggie as well. I don't blame her. And then when she finally understood it, now the author realizes that yeah, Maggie is like, I understand it thoroughly now. It's not like people actually tear it up and cook it and eat it, but yeah, it's a way of enjoying it as a reader. So that's how she understood it. And then I wonder if how many of the people who are reading this or listening to this actually know what it means. Food for thought. Don't underestimate him, she heard Dustfinger say. His voice was so different from Mo's. No one else in the world had a voice like a father's. Mo could paint pictures in the empty air with his voice alone. Look at how beautiful these words are used. Paint pictures, empty air, voice alone. So you find that it's very contradictory because painting is visual, but using the voice. This is a very beautiful comparison. I don't know if anybody knows this, but there is a case of people with rare genetic mutation thing whereby you hear something and you relate it to a taste, something like that. There is a condition out there. Psychology doesn't, you know, science hasn't fully supported that, but it is a thing, so it's very similar actually. Alright, he'll do anything to get hold of it. That was what Dustfinger said again. That was Dustfinger again. And when I say anything, I can assure you I mean anything. Alright, hold on a second, I got a text. I need to reply this one. It's work related. Alright, let's continue. I'll never let him have it. That was Mo. He'll still get his hands on it one way or another. I tell you, they're on your trail. It wouldn't be the first time. I've always managed to shake them off before. Oh yes, and for how much longer do you think? What about your daughter? Are you telling me she actually likes moving around the whole time? Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. It was so quiet behind the door that Maggie scarcely dared breathe just in case the two men heard her. So in this case, it's a little bit of revelation on the kind of life that they live. So it is pretty much confirmed that the mom is not in the picture because Dustfinger knows a thing or two about Maggie and Mo, and the duo has been constantly moving around because they are being followed by somebody and potentially dangerous. So yes. Let's continue. Finally, her father spoke again, hesitantly, as if his tongue found it difficult to form the words. Over here you can see how richly employed the writer has crafted this. Hesitantly. How hesitantly? As if his tongue found it difficult to form the words. Realize that on the other side there, Maggie has compared Mo to being able to paint pictures with his voice alone, and then suddenly the eloquent man has forgotten how to speak. So this shows the crisis involved. Then what do you think I ought to do? So here, ought is a very strong word. Should and ought are different. In a case whereby should is probably 70% of an opinion, but ought is 90% of an opinion. And pretty sure he's at his wit's end, he's desperate, and he's also angry, so he's being sarcastic at, why are you here in my life, interfering my peaceful life with my daughter that I'm trying so hard to protect and raise and like, you know, shelter from all the hardships that I'm going through. I don't want her problems, not my problems, to be her problems. Yep, you know, the constant worry of a parent like that. Come with me, I'll take you to them. A cup clinked, the sound of a spoon against china. How loud small noises sound in silence. You know how much Capricorn thinks of your talents. He'll be glad if you took it to him of your own free will. I'm sure he would. The man he found to replace you is useless. So over here we have something of an introduction to the antagonist or the villain of the story, and I don't know why it's named after a horoscope, but it's Capricorn. Yeah, literally the horoscope Capricorn. Yeah, if you are born Capricorn, there's no offense to you, okay? No offense to you, it's just a story. Capricorn, another peculiar name. Dustfinger had uttered it as if the mere sound might scorch his tongue. Maggie wiggled her chilly toes and wrinkled her cold nose. She didn't understand much of what the two men were saying, but she tried to memorize every single word of it. So this is kind of like your exams, right? You don't understand anything that's happening, but you're like, yeah, I have to pass the exam, so I'm gonna remember everything. Even though I don't know what it is, but I'll regurgitate every single concept that I memorized from my textbook and hope it gets some marks. Exactly. It will come useful later when one day you're like, oh, so that's what it meant like 5 years ago when I had an exam. I wish I knew. Well, better late than never. It was quiet again in the workshop. Oh, I don't know, said Mo at last. He sounded so weary that it tore at Maggie's heart. I'll have to think about it. When do you think his men will get here? Soon. The word dropped like a stone into silence. Soon, repeated Mo. Very well. I'll have made up my mind by tomorrow. Do you have somewhere to sleep? Oh, I can always find a place, replied Dustfinger. I'm managing quite well these days, although it's still all too much too fast for me. His laugh was not a happy one. But I'd like to know what you decide. May I come back tomorrow? About midday. Yes, of course. I'll be picking Maggie up from school at 1:30. Come after that. Maggie heard a chair being pushed back. She scurried back to her room. When the door of the workshop opened, she was just closing her bedroom door behind her. Pulling the covers up to her chin, she lay there listening as her father said goodbye to Dustfinger. And thank you for the warning anyway, she heard him add as Dustfinger's footsteps moved away, slowly and uncertainly, as if he were reluctant to leave, as if he hadn't said anything he wanted to say, but at last he was gone, and only the rain kept drumming its wet fingers on Maggie's windows. So over here you can tell that they don't have much time, and Maggie actually goes to school, so that's great. Even though they move very often, education is still a thing. So Mo is a very responsible parent. When Mo opened the door of her room, she quickly closed her eyes and tried to breathe as slowly as you do in a deep, innocent sleep. But Mo wasn't stupid. In fact, he was sometimes terribly clever. Maggie, put one of your feet out of bed, he told her. Reluctantly, she stuck her toes out from under the blanket and laid them in Mo's warm hand. They were still cold. Right, so this is how parents always know when you're up to no good. They know, they got life experience, probably because Mo was like her when he was younger. I knew it, he said. You've been spying. Can't you do as I tell you just for once? Sighing, he tucked her foot back underneath the nice warm blankets, and he sat down on her bed, passed his hands over his tired face, and looked out of the window. His hair was as dark as Mo's skin. Maggie had fair hair like her mother, who she only knew from a few faded photographs. You should be glad you look more like her than me, Mo always said. My head wouldn't look good at all on a girl's neck. But Maggie wished she did look more like him. There wasn't a face in the world she loved more. So over here with an introduction, we have an introduction about the mom. So the mom has very fair hair and Mo has very dark hair. So now we have a little bit of a hint, but we still don't know what happened to the mom. So if there's a faded photograph that is being kept, which means that maybe the parents didn't really have a terrible relationship. I didn't hear what you were saying anyway, she murmured. Good, Mo stared out of the window as if Dustfinger was still standing in the yard. Then he rose and went to the door. Try to get some sleep, he said. But Maggie didn't want to sleep. Dustfinger, what sort of a name is that? She asked. And why does he call you Silver Tongue? Mo did not reply. And this person who is looking for you, I heard what Dustfinger called him. Capricorn. Who is he? No one you want to meet. Her father didn't turn around. I thought you didn't hear anything. Good night, Maggie. This time he left the door open. The light from the passage fell on her bed, mingling with the darkness of the night that seeped through in the window. And Maggie lay there waiting for the dark to disappear and take her fear of some evil menace away with it. Only later did she understand that the evil had not appeared for the first time that night. It had just slunk back in again. Right, so I think this is the end of the first chapter itself. If you like the book, please support the author itself. So this is Cornelia Funke. It's so hard to pronounce that name. It's Cornelia Spark, right? If you translate funk to spark, it's English spark. Okay, so this is Inkheart. And yes, okay. So the last part here is it's a character development. So initially Maggie said that she didn't hear anything. And then the father didn't question it. The father wasn't even mad that she tried to spy on them. And well, at the later part, because it's a very safe environment whereby Maggie trusts the father, and then she let it slip, so she's not that smart after all. And she had so many questions, and the curiosity got over her initial guard, because the father didn't get mad at her or anything, so she felt like she was free to express herself. And then she let it slip how much she heard, which confirms to the father like, okay, so this is how much you know, huh? Well, it's a good thing we didn't say even more, so I'm not gonna tell you anything more because you were not supposed to listen to it in the first place, but I'm not gonna tell you anything more, so go to sleep. And initially the door was closed, remember? So now the door is open. So this is the period of time where it could be seen in a sense whereby, a closed door is a guarded heart, it means secrets. And an open door is when the trust is rebuilt again. So initially, like, she was very hurt, the father kept her out of it, so he closed the door. And then now, Maggie's door is open again, so he did not leave any more closed doors, so there was no more secrets. There was only a secret in that part, but because Maggie accidentally let it slip, and Mo wasn't even mad at her for finding out, so yeah, I think the trust is reconciled in this case. At least I think that's what the author is trying to imply. I'm not very sure, but it could be seen like that. It's beautiful symbolism. But anyways, that's all for today. I hope this had been a little something. I don't know, my reading voice is still not so... I haven't decided on what kind of voice I want to read it in, because I am putting it at the lower register and it kind of hurts. Anything more than this would probably strain my throat too much. But I also don't want to sound like Hamtaro or Squeak Toy. According to Makoto, I'm gonna cry. Yes, but that's all for today. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching those who are in the VODs. Please let me know if you would like me to continue the series. And I'll see you guys again next time. Alright, bye-bye!